to ask questions. But yeah, thanks, Kylie. I'm happy to be here and chat with you guys. Last user group was actually the first one I was able to join, and I've been out of user groups for a year, so it's been awesome to be involved, and I'm grateful you guys let me in. Come crash your meetings. But today I want to talk about some tools. I guess this is kind of what I started doing in quarantine is making things for dynamics or just tools that weren't intended to go out in public, but then I ended up doing it, and I realized this is like something I really love doing, and it's a lot of fun. So I hope by the end of this, you have something new that you can play with, and something that'll help you out in your day to day. But I also love to add and extend, add features, whatever. So just feel free to reach out if you think we can um, improve any of these. But yeah, we'll take a look at those products, and then also we're going to take one of them and hack it up a bit and deploy it to Dynamics. But yeah, so who am I? My name is Ty Corcoran. I've worked with Dynamics since 2013, 2011 on-prem, and I currently work just with online D365, generally most current. I work at Georgia Pacific right now as a Power Platform developer or solution architect or whatever needs to be done with the Power Platform. And I love hockey and making tools for Dynamics. But if to get in touch, this is my Twitter, my blog, GitHub, and email. You can definitely reach out on LinkedIn as well if you but I don't really. I get a lot of those messages, so I'd say Twitter would be the best. Or you could log an issue on GitHub for like a new feature or something, and I'll definitely respond. All right, so the agenda. There's a few items. The first one I want to show is this PCF control I made for group approvals in Power Automate. A last login module web resource, a couple XRM toolbox tools, and then we're going to take this one thing I made. It's not really a product, it's more like a template or an example of how to make a multi-page modal pop-out with Vue.js to hopefully maybe satisfy any dialogue needs that you may need. And I'm just going to talk about like what my experiences were like and what resources I found to be really helpful when getting involved in all this stuff. But yeah, and then hopefully, and then at the end we'll go and do kind of like a live coding demo there. Now, before we start, actually, I wanted to ask you guys something. If you've ever heard of or worked with Vue, React, or everyone's heard of JavaScript, but if you work with JavaScript or you've made XRM toolbox tools, can you drop like a VRJX in the chat or something so I can just kind of see and know if what everybody's kind of worked with?
All right, we have one person who's worked with all four. We have lots of people with XRM Toolbox and some with JavaScript, a couple React, some people who haven't done any of them.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so it should be pretty familiar. This isn't going to be like a lesson on Vue. I kind of want to see if I can frame it up so that if you wanted to just, I don't know, dip a toe in with you and see if you liked it, it'll be kind of gauged at just how can I use this without having to go and learn all these other things and make it work for me today really quickly. So that's what we'll do at the end when we go through this step 4, this modal thing. But without further ado, let's jump into this group approval viewer. So I've always, or since I started using Power Automate or had the opportunity to, when a request or a requirement that involved like a group approval would come up, I'd always, be excited to see that that was an option and quickly remember that you can't show progress in those group approvals. You can't see who it's waiting on. It's even not intuitive how to find the responses. If a manager's asking me, why isn't this order approved or why isn't this whatever approved? How could I make it easier for them to figure that out? And so that was kind of the problem I was trying to solve when I made this thing. And let's go take a look at it actually, because I have it right here. So the the Power Automate approvals group approval, what you would do is you would just create it just like you normally would. But once it's active, you could embed this PCF control like right here on the form. And you're seeing two because there's two flavors of it, or two variations. This one on the left is a material UI component, and this one is the Fluent UI, or the unified client-esque Office Fabric styled component. And so this one here, this looks, when you put it next to something, you can see this Fluent UI one. It looks pretty good, and it kind of blends in with everything else, but you can see the comments. You can search, although I don't know why most people probably wouldn't do that. But you'd be able to use now those group approvals without worrying about, I guess, having to make another entity to track the progress of the approval and the comments that come in and everything. So that was what I was trying to do with that. And if you're ever interested in checking it out or using it, you could always go to the PCF gallery, and it will pop up here in just a minute, and just type in approval should work. It's right here. So it's out there, and then to download it, you just go here. And the releases here have managed and unmanaged solutions with both the Fluent and the group approval, or I'm sorry, the material UI version, depending on whichever one that you like from the look and feel. This one has pagination built in, this one doesn't, but I guess this one's a little bit tighter. It kind of makes more effective use of the form, of space on the form, so I kind of lean towards that one. But this was, I'm tired of making approval tracker entities, and I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore, and we can use the group approvals that work in Power, or that are provided in Power Automate out of the box. They actually work really, really well. But I want to just show one thing about the setup of this. So there's one thing that you have to do. There's no real configuration needed, but when you set up your approval, where you might do start and wait for an approval, you just split that into two steps. So you'd go create an approval, then you would take that approval ID, and you'll create a field on whatever entity that this thing's about, and you would bind it to it's MSDYN flow approvals. That's the entity, this one. So that's an entity that's available in the Dataverse, and you just make a field lookup to that, and then you mount the PCF control onto that thing. And so as long as in your flow where you trigger the approval, you just connect it to the ID of this, and then you just start, or just wait on it there, and then everything just works. If you start the flow over again or do another approval, it's just going to show the most recent one because it's just bound to that field on the form. But once it is, you can just come to navigate to it, refresh, and it'll show the status. So a manager or someone that really doesn't care about anything, they just want to know what's going on with the X approval, they can just come in here and see that. And yeah, so that's the group approval viewer. Does anyone have any questions about that? Yeah, it's actually, I have a slide that I wanted to show that
I may have missed this, Ty, but is the data that you're using for that, is that the out of the box approvals data, or are you creating your own data to show?
No, yeah, it's all out of the box, yeah.
Okay.
So when you make an approval in your tenant, or I guess in your org, these things get created. So you'll get this approvals entity. Then for every recipient on there, there's a approval request record. And as they respond, these get created. And so what I do in the control is just when you give me that, or when you bind the lookup to the form, then I can take that ID and go fish all this stuff out, and then I stitch it together and then just stick it on the page for you. But yeah, these are all in there.
In the approval itself, like how does the approval bind to the record? Is it just?
Yeah, that's the one thing you have to do. So when you start.
Oh yeah, that's what you're showing. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that part, that middle step there. So you'll have an ID from here, and then you just take that and stick it into that field that you'll create, and that's really all you have to do.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's pretty easy configuration. And then yeah, I've been using it for a while, and it's made my life a lot easier. You don't have to make these useless entities to track like the comments and stuff. because if you do actually go into advanced bind and go look these things up, they don't have names. Like it's just hard to, if you have a lot of approvals, it's just a pile of data that you got to sift through and kind of guess like when it was created, go see if you can find it. But it's not really realistic to ask people that are users, right? They're not going to go look for that. And they might even, well, they'll have permissions to see it probably, but they won't want to do that. So yeah, that's how that works. And these, if you're ever interested in trying PCF, these are some of like links I even come back to still all the time. Specifically, Andrew Butenko has a PCF Academy series where he makes like 5 to 10, 12-minute videos on a bunch of subjects that are all really awesome. We all know Diana Birkelbach, the PCF lady. She's got a ton of amazing posts, but I mean, these are really good ones, especially Ivan's top 10 tips and tricks, and I could just go on. And even Benedict from the last meeting, he's making a series where you kind of go through these exercises and do step-by-step setting up various PCF things. So these are all really cool, just resources I wanted to mention, just in case you wanted to try it out and see how you liked it. All right, so the next thing, I'm sure everybody in here has been asked, how do I, when they at least start a new implementation, how do I, see who's logging in or how engaged people are, they're using the system. I know when I worked in consulting originally, that would come up like every customer. And probably if not a lot of people here have a console app that they can run and get those audit logs. But again, I wanted to make this something someone else can do. And so I just started hacking around with Vue, and I found out that I made this pretty cool thing, or at least I think it's pretty cool, that makes it really easy for an administrator to just get all this audit data. And so I'm gonna actually pull it up in the blog first because I have a good video. So this is what it looks like, and I'll show you the real thing in a minute. But you come in, just pick a start and an end date and pick a business unit. You could even search by an individual user and just click the fetch button, and it'll query the audit base table. It uses fetch XML aggregation to get your last login, and then it shows it on the screen. And I've added a column to here since then that shows the count. So you can just actually go in and see like, who's logging in a lot. And when you click export, one thing that's really cool is it'll show you who didn't log in at all at the bottom here. And that's like pretty much what a lot of people want to know. Because if you have a lot of users, the audit base table is going to be really big. There's a limit to what you can do with fetch XML aggregation. So you have to put in the business unit I would recommend, and then pick maybe like a 90-day window. And that should be probably enough. But if you'll be able to at least see if somebody hasn't logged in 90 days. And so, at that point, I mean, if you wanted to know how long, you could just type their email in here and search that too, and it'll show you. But it is a little Big Brother-esque, but it's hilarious actually to look at sometimes. But when you install it, it's just a web resource. It's a HTML file and a JavaScript file. It's all made with Vue.js. It's all open source in my GitHub account. But if you wanted to just go take it and install it, you could technically put it on a dashboard or wherever you wanted. You would just put this HTML web resource into anywhere that would accept it. But I put it in here as a configuration page, and then you can just kind of, the trials don't have audit data, so I can't do a really cool demo or anything like that. But you can just kind of, I think, mess around with it. But you could just install it, run the report, uninstall it. It's pretty small. And yeah, this has been helpful because now I can just let other people go do it. I don't have to, run the console app and give it back to them. It's just something that I can empower administrators to go do on their own. And it is fun to just look at sometimes. But yeah, that's this last login audit manager. So if for downloading it or using it, again, this you could go to my blog and there's a link there, or you can come here. And there's a release that you can download right over here, and the manage and unmanaged solution. And all the code is obviously in here as well. But yeah, does anyone have any questions or feel free to share how they deal with this? I'm sure you guys get asked all the time by customers for engagement stats and stuff like that.
Ty, quick question on this one. Which entities are the logins being tracked in?
It's in the audit base table. So there's like a lot of other stuff that gets in there. But there is I'll actually pull this up. I apply a filter to a certain type of audit, and let me even go refresh my memory what that was called. So yeah, it's audits. I actually go to VS Code. This will be easier to search through. Yeah, it's the audit base or audit table.
Okay.
And I filter on, there's a specific filter. I think operation 4 is what is a login or an access, I should say. Because it could be from mobile. I think it even counts Power Automate as well. I have to go double check. But it's not just specifically like a login. Like if you own a flow that runs 1 million times, you'll look like you logged in 1 million times. But yeah, if anyone knows a better way to do that, you can always please tell me. This was just the most.
So if you're using, like I say, Power Apps portal or something like that, does it also get tracked within the audit table?
That's a good question. I haven't had the opportunity to test it actually, but I would assume that if you access it, do you log in with your same credentials through like a Power Apps portal, like you would still have the same Azure user?
Two types. One will be the one using the AD. Another one will be using the native kind of the login mechanism on the portal.
Gotcha. Yeah, I haven't had like the benefit to test that yet, but if you do and want to share any feedback with me, I'd definitely be interested to know, see if we can make this, if it needs to be improved or changed to take on that use case. That's just something I haven't had much experience with using yet.
Cool, thank you.
I think Jim Novak on? Because it is different, right? Like if you log in from if you use a portal as a corporate like intranet, then it would be logged here. But if you're logging in as a public user who's a contact in the system, it wouldn't be logged in the audit. But there may be tracking. The portal side of things I don't know very well, but there may be tracking in addition to the audit log. Thought I saw Jim on earlier. He would know better than I do.
Got it. I'll go take a look to see if anything's tracked in there, because one of the things we're configuring the portal, they recommend turn off, I guess, one of the setting called last successful login. So I don't know if this is the same table, same field, or this is totally separate one. But I'll go take a look, and I'll probably ping you on Twitter or something to let you know what I see.
Yeah, for sure. Aiden, do the results include users that never logged in? So if they never logged in, they would show up in the export. Like there's a section at the bottom that says people that aren't in this time period. And then so you could kind of find out that way. But if they probably wouldn't show up. Which entity? I think I got everyone's question. Okay. And also, I should mention, we'll put this I'm gonna make a blog post with all the links and stuff in the presentation, so you don't that'll all go up and out. Actually, I'll just drop it in the chat real quick too. Awesome. All right. So on to XRM Toolbox. I'll answer that question, Michael, in just a second, actually. XRM Toolbox. So I created 2 tools, which I think this is really fun. And one thing that I never realized, if you work at a company that's pretty big and you manage a bunch of different orgs, I started making private XRM Toolbox tools as well that we just use to do special things internally that we don't want to maybe necessarily deploy code to other other orgs environments and manage versions and whatever. And so that's actually like kind of, I've never heard of people, I guess that might not just be an unspoken thing, but it's been really useful for us, and it's something you can totally do. And so I'm going to put some resources about on my blog post and about just the getting started tools that I use for the XRM toolbox. I forgot to do that here on this presentation, so I apologize about that. But that's a really good, useful thing to do if you wanted to. Like I work with several businesses at Georgia Pacific or Coke, and so this like kind of gives me a way to not have to manage code in a bunch of places, and you can share the DLL with your teammates, and they can do stuff, and it's a pretty clean and easy way to work with a bunch of different orgs or customers, even if you're in consulting. But the first tool I made was this field creator, and it's, you know, it's not a looker. It's not a lot on this. It's really simple, really. I mean, you download a template here, and I'll just put this in DCUG. Let's go. And the main reason I did, there's one specific reason I did this, but you can see here as just all of the, you know, types of things you might want to do if you wanted to import like hundreds of fields at once. But one thing that I needed was a bunch of different types of option sets, like a new option set or a new local option set, a new global option set, or use an existing one in all different flavors. So and multi-select option set as well. And so I wanted to try and make this tool anyways, just for the fun of it. But that ended up being a real use case or requirement I needed. So there's some information here, just how to use it, really easy stuff. But these tooltips also will tell you some information you'll need to know. But you would just save this as a CSV and import it, and it makes fields. And that's pretty much it. If there's ever a bug or anything, you'll see logs and stuff in here, and you can export those and then send them to me to fix it. But it shouldn't have any problems. It's pretty simple. And this one's a little bit more interesting. So I have, well, back when we had events that people went to, you know, we would get these really big CSVs of contact information from like maybe new leads or existing customers. But, you know, it's like thousands of people's names, emails, company names in a CSV. And my team needed to import these into a marketing list. But what would always happen with Dynamics is it creates a bunch of new extra contacts and stuff that you don't really want. And so I was like, well, let's see if I can make a tool that would help with this problem. And essentially what this thing will do is you can just grab a marketing list, submit a template, which you download the template from up here, and it will go through. The template has a certain structure that actually can't be changed, or it can't be messed with, otherwise it might cause some problems. But if people want to add more fields into it, I'm happy to do that. I actually didn't know how much to put in. I wanted to make sure it worked for as many versions as I could. So I was kind of conservative with the fields. So it's like first name, last name, all the address fields and stuff like that, source campaign. But if people have other ones, please let me know. I'll add them in. But what it will do is when you import the CSV, it'll just go through, and if there's a contact or if there's a lead that exists, stick it in the marketing list. Don't make a duplicate. If the account has a name, because we always get string or text names for accounts. If there's duplicates, then go recurse to the parent and assign it there. And then just add them all into the marketing list, and then they can pipe that into Dynamics marketing segments or whatever. And this just made it easier to deal with like the issue of duplicates and having to just throw a bunch of leads in there, and where you want to use your existing stuff. So it's more of a, I don't know if it's a use case that comes up commonly for people or not, but it was helpful for us, and hopefully it'll be helpful for you guys. Has that actually come up for anyone where you needed to import like a large CSV of contacts or leads into, you wanted to merge it into a marketing list or anything like that?
It's always been around, at least on my side, it's been with big events. So if we were doing a SharePoint Saturday, and being able to have all the content in one place, and being able to share it back out with the vendors who sponsor the events. So.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Cool. But yeah, that's the marketing list importer. Let's go back here. All right. Now, what I want to do next, I'll actually go back to Dynamics and show you guys this thing. So we all know, Dialogue's been gone a long time. I made one the old-fashioned way, and by just using, just vanilla JavaScript, and I don't really want to do it that way. And Andrew Butanko made this post about making a modal pop up like this, something like that with React. At the time, I didn't know React or Vue, and I just decided like that'd be really cool to do one day. And then just one day, I just tried it out, and I made this thing. And we're gonna go through, and I personally think that this sample that I'll show and we'll hack up here is like relatively easy to, as that intro, to kind of get in there and get your feet wet and see if you like it or not. But once you get it all set up in Dynamics, which this blog post will go through every step here, it's actually really easy to make changes, and you don't need to be a Vue expert. Vue leverages HTML and CSS all the same way you know it. It's not like React where everything is JavaScript and you kind of have to learn a few more prerequisites, but I think it's really accessible. And so to Michael's question, why Vue? I kind of like that the mission of Vue is to be the best of React and Angular. At least that's kind of how I read. That was Evan Yu's kind of goal. And it's been just, the framework has been just kind of going up and up in popularity because it really is kind of the best of both worlds, but I think it really is more accessible and very easy to learn or get started with. And so you can kind of inch your way into it progressively and working on it and kind of learning piece by piece. But I have to say, or go back to our deck here, I made also a Canvas app version of this. So if you don't want to do the Vue stuff, you could open a Canvas app just in the same way. And Scott Duro, actually, he made a smart button that does this. So this is opening with JavaScript, specifically the XRM navigation navigate to method pops this thing open. But Scott Duro has a button that you can just install in your ribbon that would do all the same stuff. So that's pretty cool and worth checking out there. But let's go to the next slide. Now we're gonna go hack this thing up and just make some changes to it on the fly. But I guess before we do that, I will mention there's some prerequisites to do a Vue project. Like for example, Git, Node, the Vue CLI, which will build your project and scaffold new projects. And then my recommendation would be VS Code with these two extensions. This is all, again, documented on the blog as well. So you could technically install these things, come to GitHub here, and go back to this one. Clone this project. Once you open it up here, just run, I did this before we started, just not waste everybody's time, just run npm install, and that will install all your project dependencies. And then at this point, you'll have something that looks just like this. So if I wanted to just open this right now, you can run npm run serve, and this will create, the Vue CLI will create a dev environment using Node and pop it up on the screen here. So I see there's some comments coming in. Let me see. So Dave, the difference would be it will actually go and dedupe, like if you have an existing lead with a certain email, it'll put that person in the list versus creating a new one. Okay. All right, so we just created a dev server here using Node, and we can just pop this open. And as you can see, this is literally the component we were just looking at, but it's a single page application. It's a website. We could build it and put it on the internet just as it is right now. Not that we ever would, or that would even make sense, but in Dynamics, I have a tab here with this modal. I just attach the function to a button to pop it open. And so if I were to come here and like ty@gmail.com, oh. In this example, I'm just taking the data, turning it into a string and pumping it into this field. But you could do a lot of other stuff with it. As just what I was doing for an example of how to take something from the modal and stick it back into the form. But let's go here and just mess with this a little bit. So the project looks something like that. So you have your views here. We have an info page, a get started page, and a submit page. And you can kind of see it, navigate around here. We also have this app.view, which is in this situation, it's like the top of the pyramid where everything rolls up into. This is, just to simplify, it's really two components that we need to worry about, or two sections. We have the buttons at the top, or the sort of header, and then this router view thing. And that's just where the content's going to get swapped out as we navigate around. So when we click on this, the top is staying the same, and it's just really changing the contents of the body. And you can kind of say where that needs to change just by defining this router view tag here. But let's just go take a step back and just edit this thing up a little bit. So we're on the get started page. And one thing I love about working with these projects is they have something called hot module reload or hot module replacement. And I could do this, hit save, and it's just boom, right there, instant feedback. Another thing I love is there is a concept of reactive data in Vue, React, and Angular, all of these things. And reactive data, you set it up in Vue like this. Let me just get this sorted. It's a function that returns an object, and all of the properties in here will be special, they'll be reactive. And so when we change these properties, anything on the DOM that is dependent on that will change too. Or it'll be reviewed and evaluated and then change if it needs to change. So this is more easy to see with an actual example. So we have this property, a special property called isVisible, and it's true. Let's stick this on here using another special view directive called vif, and I just do that, hit save, everything looks the exact same. If I turn this to false, it disappears. Now if I go and add a button, let's say change, add a on-click handler here, and we'll call this show me. In here, I'm going to add a methods object and a function called show me. And what we'll do is just change this dot is visible to the opposite. Make a typo in here. We should get some reactive data. And so this is obviously an incredibly primitive example, but I just want to show like how easily, thinking of a form or things popping out and swapping and, just kind of having this dynamic web resource. That's not a lot of code I just wrote. I mean, it is new stuff probably for a lot of people, but what this does essentially, when this is true or false, it'll remove this entire node from the DOM. So if it's false, it goes like that. If it's true, it's back. And that's all managed by Vue. And you don't have to ever worry about that or anything like that. So it makes kind of doing some of this stuff a little bit cleaner and easier. You can also do something like toggle classes, which is pretty common. So we'll add a class binding here. This takes an object. Well, first let's add a style. Add something called is danger. The color red. So what I want to do is anytime when this becomes true, I want this is danger class to go on that text or on whatever and turn it red. Before I do that, actually, I do want to mention there's this scoped keyword is not normal. It's special for Vue, and it'll allow you to kind of scope your CSS just to this component, which is really helpful sometimes. So if I do this, this is a global style I can use anywhere in the app. If if I do that, it's only going to be applied here. So let's go back to our class here and just say we're going to add is danger and bind it to a true or false, which will be our is visible. Now, if I did this all properly, it'll be red now. Hey, so things, conditional formatting or just conditionally changing stuff can be done like almost painlessly in one line, right? I do want to mention this colon here. If I remove it, this is back to a string. So adding a colon will make the what's within the double quotes be evaluated as JavaScript, and Vue will know how to handle certain types of style bindings or class bindings, and you could pass arrays of classes in and do all kinds of crazy things. But this is just a simple example of just using reactivity. So let me just save all this stuff here. Now, what I want to do really quick is add a table. Well, first off, add a new page, and then add a table in it, and then just shove some asynchronous data into it. So let's grab just one of these and just copy paste. Let's rename this component here to modal data. And we don't need this. We'll change this to page data. All right, change this. Okay, so now we have a component to show when we hit this data page, but in doing what I just did, nothing's going to change, right? Vue doesn't know this thing exists. And so we need to tell it that it's actually a page we want to show. And you would do that in your router here. And we'll just copy this root. Import the component we made in here. And so if I did everything properly, the third page will be that data page. So let's go see. All right, good. Now let's come over here. And we need a table. And so we're not going to make a regular HTML table. We're going to actually go out and use what I used on the last login module. And that's, well, another thing I love is we have all these amazing tools from the open source community just kind of available. One I like to use is Vue Good Table. It's all free, it's all great, and it just helps you be really productive and kind of, we could set up a table like this with search and filtering and sorting and all of these things in just a few minutes versus having to reinvent the wheel. Now, to use a table component or any component, really, we got to install it to our project. So we're going to install Vue Good Table. Now, while that's going, I'm going to get some other things set up here. So this component requires some styles, which I'm just going to stick them here. And eventually, when this is done, we'll import the component there. We need to tell Vue that this thing exists in this component, so we'll register it like this. All right, start our dev server back up. Now this is just yelling at us because we registered a component we're not using, and Vue wants us to make sure we use it. So you could do that by something like that. Vue's happy, or the linter is happy. So we have this weird component thing, like what is this? This is an HTML. And it also, like I registered Vue Good Table in Pascal case here, but I'm using it kebab case here. That might be weird to a lot of people. Vue actually will convert this from camel case or Pascal case, and you can use it up here as kebab case. So that's something it handles behind the scenes that I just wanted to mention in case you're looking at that and like, how does that become that? That's Vue behind the scenes. Now, to we need some data, right, to put in this thing. So we're gonna make another reactive data function called data. And always returns an object, and I'm just gonna copy this in for now. Now that alone will not do anything because we didn't bind these arrays to anything yet. So we do that next. Say rows equals rows, and columns equals columns. Specifically this columns, right? I should probably have chosen a different name, but now if I save this, we should see a table just pop up. Columns. There you go, I have to refresh, but now we have a table with some data. This is all static data. Not really realistic, but maybe if you did want to use this modal like in CRM and you wanted to go and get some contacts or get some, I don't know, leads or something, we need some asynchronous process. So I made in preparation for this a quick API call. I'm just gonna copy this in here. So we're gonna just take this API I use. It's called randomuser.me, which is pretty useful. It's just some public API you could just hit and do stuff. It gives you even photos and all kinds of cool things. But in this scenario, we're just gonna make this call, and within this blob of JSON, there's a first and a last, and that it's the first and last name. That's all we really care about. So I'm gonna change the definition of the table by adding columns, label, and field, and this is all really well documented in that plugin documentation, but you'll see now we're here. And so let's go. There's another special method we can use called mounted. It's a lifecycle method. And so when this component's mounted, it will do whatever's inside this function. And so I'm gonna grab this API call I have, paste it on in like that. And all this does is it goes out, gets that same JSON, transforms it into just the first and last name, and then it just shoves it right into this .rows, which would be this .rows right here, this empty array. So save. There we go. So that actually just went out and grabbed that data. Now, if you go forward and come back, you'll notice the names are changing. And that's because this component's getting mounted over and over and making a call again. So if it was something like you wanted to persist, you would use like, there's a view feature, I guess a library or add-on called Vuex, and you would install that to give you global state that you could persist across the pages. But this is just, I didn't want to get into all that here. I just wanted to show just a little bit of this example, I guess. And so finally, let's, before we get to how does this get into dynamics, I want to come to the submit page here where this form is and just show how it gets in there. So the navigate to method doesn't have a way to pass back data to the form necessarily. It just, what I'm doing is stringifying your responses in the form, sticking them in the session storage, and then we retrieve them later. There's other ways that this could probably be done. This is just the way that I'm doing it here. But if you do look at this code and you want to know why these functions are here, I was actually going to try and get a feature in for this presentation where we would trigger a flow or an HTTP triggered flow from within here instead of writing it back to the form. And these functions totally work in doing that if you wanted to use them. Right now, I was going to, because that's like a public and pretty insecure way of doing this, I was going to make an API management blog post instead, but I just got over ambitious there. But I will get that out next. But you can consume like an environment variable in here just by coming to the root of the project and just typing env. And we'll grab this here. And then you could put a flow endpoint in there instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. And then essentially this would be, sorry, these functions would both work, and you can just pass them into the submit versus right here, that submit handler instead of the one that I'm using. But it's a lot about view. So this is, how do we get this into Dynamics and make it useful? That's actually not terribly hard either. You just need an HTML and a JavaScript web resource. If you were to build this project right here like this, well, if you clone my project, it'll work because this config is here, but I actually added this. So all of these React, Vue, probably all the other frameworks, they'll actually split the JavaScript and CSS files into multiple for performance reasons and to help minimize blocking time when it's a website. But since we're kind of making components for CRM, they're really small anyways. If I put this config in here, Webpack will just pack it into the smallest amount of files possible. And so I'm just going to build this project just like that. And what will happen is we'll get a folder up here called dist, and it'll be essentially a single page application ready to go on the internet. Just take a second. Here it is. So this is an important file, obviously. It's your HTML file. There's one change you need to make to it. Well, there's two changes. Out of the box, it's going to point at this JavaScript file Vue made, but you want to change this to point at the web resource in Dynamics that you're going to add. So there's one instance of that reference there, and then it's here as well. And that file is right here. It's a big blob of JavaScript, and we are literally going to copy this and just paste it right into CRM. Right here. There's like a few extra steps you do the first time, but afterwards, just making an update, build, copy, paste, that's really all you have to do after that first initial setup. And I put all these steps in the blog too, so don't, sorry if I'm running through it, but I know we're kind of getting close to time here. So let's just publish this. And, all right, let's go find through the million tabs where this thing is. All right, refresh the browser. Okay. All right, now flip the switch again and see if the demo gods are nice to me today. There you go. And so, you know, this is, again, this super primitive, unrealistic example, but kind of just shows like a jumping off point, really, how, you know, after getting, you know, you don't have to be a Vue expert to make this useful for you in Dynamics. You can kind of, what I did is just ease into it a little bit, doing, I don't know, little things like this. And then I realized I just kept going because Vue is a really well documented framework as well. And that rarely have I ever had to Google anything twice. You know, one search usually gets me the answer. But yeah, that's well, before I say that's it, I think I have. Nope, that is it. So that's just what I wanted to show today. Hopefully that piqued some of y'all's interest, and you know, didn't bore you to death with a bunch of code on the screen. But yeah, if you ever have questions or issues or want to add any new features, you know, just reach out to me anytime. I like to talk about this stuff. It's fun to me. So yeah, I hope that you all got something out of it, and appreciate you letting me share with you today.